Rings into clouds. The perennial Eurorack patch. Loved by millions. Hated by as many. When Rings and Clouds were released by Mutable Instruments in 2015, they quickly became some of the most popular modules in Eurorack. They were, and continue to be, the gateway drug that brought many new people into modular. Why? Because of what you're hearing right now. This beautiful sound is easy to create, and you can just let it play forever, creating new melodies and providing a calming and evocative background to your day. It sounds great, so what's the problem? Well, because so many people were using these modules and making this exact sound, it started to become cliche. In music, as in many things in life, it's important to change. It keeps things fresh. It keeps us interested and inspired. There are many modular patches yet to be created, but this one has been done. Patching Rings into Clouds is a meme at this point. In 2026, if you're patching Rings into Clouds, you are pretty cringe. You don't want to be cringe, do you? Don't worry, I have good news. In 2021, Mutable Instruments released their final module, Beads, which you see here. Beads is the spiritual successor to Clouds. It works in much the same way and produces a similar effect. But because Beads is technically not Clouds, patching Rings into Beads is technically not cringe. Rejoice! We found a loophole that makes us safe from ridicule. Joking aside, there's nothing wrong with Rings into Clouds, nor Rings into Beads. The only thing that's cringe is gatekeeping art. If you enjoy the sounds of these modules together, use them together. Keep using them, keep enjoying them, and pay no attention to the petty, insecure hordes who try to belittle you for enjoying something. There are plenty of things the world needs less of, and music isn't one of them. Looking down on Rings into Clouds is just as cliche as using them. That said, what we're going to do in this video is explore some patches with Rings and Beads that sound different than what you're hearing now. Rings, Clouds, and Beads can do a lot of different sounds, and there's plenty to get out of them that sounds great and won't bore the old-timers. We'll start with a few clips of the patches to come, then we'll break them down one by one. If you like what you hear and you want to learn more, stick around. If you enjoy the video and find it useful, I hope you'll follow along for more videos like it, and perhaps join the Discord community or support my work on Patreon. For those that are new to modular, or new to these particular modules, I'm going to do a quick explanation of what they do. If you're already familiar with these, then you can skip ahead to the next chapter of the video. Rings, this module on the left, is a resonator. It uses a technique called physical modeling to simulate the sounds of an acoustic instrument. The basic idea is that there's an exciter, some sort of signal or sound that simulates the energy that's put into a physical instrument. And then the resonator is the echoing or the vibration or whatever else happens in the physical world that is affected by that exciter. In particular, Rings has 3 modes, which are controlled by this top right switch. The first green mode is called the modal synthesis mode, and this simulates like hitting a drum or blowing into a tube, something like that. to create the sounds that you would have from a physical instrument. The mode that we're in right now is the middle orange mode, which is called sympathetic strings, and this simulates instruments like a sitar, where there's strings that are next to each other, and the ones that produce the sort of unique tone are actually vibrating because the ones next to them are vibrating. This is the mode that is often used for this sort of pretty bell-like ambient sound that Rings into Clouds is known for. Finally, the red mode, the one on the right, is inharmonic strings, and this is another sort of string patch, but uses a sort of different technique that can get you, as the name implies, sort of more inharmonic sounds that may not be quite as pleasing, but can do some interesting replications of drum and strings type sounds in the real world. That's the basic idea for rings. Clouds and beads being the one on the right here, are what Mutable Instruments calls texture synthesizers. Technically, the technique they use is called granular processing. What it does is it takes an audio input, which you can see here on this red cable. This is the audio out of rings going into the audio input of beads. And beads is recording all the time in a loop. Has a buffer inside that keeps track of a few seconds of audio. It then takes that buffer of audio and slices it up into little tiny pieces, and then you have controls over how those little pieces are played back. Those pieces are called grains, hence the term granular. So the idea is that you record some sort of audio, and then you play back little tiny bits of the grains, but you repeat them very quickly, and then you layer them on top of each other. You vary the length of the grains and the pitch of the grains. They can be offset from the incoming audio. And so you can kind of take the incoming audio, which from Rings is very pretty, and smear it into this kind of ambient wash of tones and reverb and some degree of percussive attack, but also smoothness. Clouds and beads both have a built-in reverb, which is part of what adds to this effect. They're very similar modules, so even though we'll be using beads in these patches, pretty much everything we're going to do in this video could also be done with clouds, and it'll sound different because the modules are slightly different and have different internals, but the basic ideas are the same. As you can hear, this first patch is very different from the cliche patch we started with, that Rings into Clouds is known for. We're doing something rhythmic, and we're using the green mode on Rings, the modal synthesis node, to create these sort of drum sounds that are pitched but inharmonic. Critically, we're also using an external sound source from plates into the input of Rings. This overrides the internal exciter and allows us to resonate based on custom sounds. In this case, we're using the second red mode of plates, which is a white noise with a variable clock speed. If I mute all these other sounds for a second, we can listen to what the exciter sounds like. So that's the exciter by itself. I have the trigger coming on this blue cable, and it's molted to both the trigger of plates and the trigger of rings. So every time I want rings to make a sound, it's going to excite plates, send that exciter signal into rings, and make sure that they trigger at the same time. If I unplug this, there'll be a constant source of sound coming from plates, and that'll trigger rings more often than I want it to. So this keeps them in sync. We can vary this pretty significantly. The harmonics control changes the type of filter from low pass to high, band pass to high pass. The timbre changes the clock speed of the white noise. And then the morph is resonance of the filter. So changing all of these things will significantly change the way that Rings processes the sound. Of course, this doesn't have to be plates. You can patch in any sound source and get all sorts of interesting things that Rings could never do on its own. But let's focus on rings. Changing the structure will give you different inharmonic sounds. Change the spread, so you'll start to hear higher pitches when you go up higher on the structure. Get more of those sort of bell-like ringing sounds, but again, different than what we were hearing in the ambient patch. Beads also is doing a rhythmic thing. Let's take it out for a second. That's our starting source. And then as we bring in beads, we're getting clocked grains because I have a clock coming in on this seed input. Changing the size can make the grains appear to sort of happen out of time. And changing the envelope shape of the grains can have other interesting rhythmic effects. And then, of course, adding drums back in. Really gives it a cool groove. Try pitching down too. Lots of different interesting sounds you can make out of this combo that sound nothing like that ambient patch. So I think the rules, if you're trying to avoid the cliche and do something different, is stay off that orange mode in rings. Add some rhythm to it. Don't overdo the reverb on beads or clouds. And stay to shorter sizes on the grains to keep them more rhythmic. And of course, experiment with different quality modes. On this orange mode of beads, we get the dry signal with high fidelity, but the wet signal, the grains coming from beads, are at reduced quality to give a little bit of grunge to the sound. Once again, we have something very different sounding coming from rings and beads. In this patch, we're using one of the hidden modes. If you move the mode switch on rings to the green mode, and then hold the mode switch button down for a second or two, the green light will start flashing, and rings becomes a 2-operator FM synthesizer, completely bypassing its usual resonator functions. In this mode, there's 2 operators. The structure controls the ratio between the 2 operators. The brightness is the index of frequency modulation. The damping controls envelope over both the amplitude and the frequency modulation. And the position controls feedback, which can get some really cool distorted buzzy sounds. If we bring in beads, just a touch, we can get some very cool sounds. If you move the structure dial to positions other than fully clockwise, fully counterclockwise, or noon, you'll get uneven ratios between the two operators, which will give you more inharmonic sounds. Let's bring in plates playing another melodic part. So there you go. Got essentially an FM bass with weird artifacts being added by beads. Sounds nothing at all like our ambient, beautiful Rings into Clouds patch. The last patch uses the Easter egg mode on Rings. In order to enter this mode, you need to position the knobs exactly as shown here, and then hold the mode switch button for a few seconds until you see the light flash multiple colors. To exit the mode, do the same thing. When using rings and clouds or beads, and trying to avoid the cliche ambient patch, you can still make things that are pretty. In this patch, we're using the Easter egg mode of Rings, which turns it into an organ or string machine synth. In this mode, the structure creates chords in different positions. The brightness scans through a bunch of different waveforms with increasing brightness as you turn. The damping controls decay time and then attack time past 12 for longer tones. And the position controls one of 3 different effects, which are controlled by the mode. I have it in the orange mode, which is a chorus. But there's also a reverb and a vowel filter. I like the chorus. I think it goes well with this. So if we start to bring in beads, we get a little bit of rhythmic interest. I have the size time very short, so we just kind of catch the edge of those transients. But we can increase the size and get something a little more pitched. I have the pitch knob tuned up to a perfect fifth to create that harmonic above the incoming note. You can change the shape of the envelope to get different sounds out of beads. I think the reverb goes a long way on this, just as it does with the usual ambient patch. You can play with the wet-dry to sort of emphasize the grains versus the incoming audio from rings. Based on how big the grains are, you get sort of different rhythmic patterns. And then you get back into that sort of smeary territory, which we generally want to avoid when trying to avoid the cliche patch. But it sounds great, so if you like it, go for it. Bring in a little feedback. How about we patch a sequence into the structure to change the chords? And how about a little external delay from C legs? We can also mess with the time to add a little bit of an offset and sample grains from farther back in the recording. You can get some other sort of interesting rhythmic patterns in the grains. I hope these patch explanations have excited you, no pun intended, about all the things you can do with rings, clouds, and beads outside the cliche patch. Remember to have fun with them and enjoy what you make, regardless of how you choose to use them. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, please consider supporting my work on Patreon. You can join for free, or chip in a few dollars a month for high-quality audio downloads of all the musical performances that appear on my YouTube channel, as well as full access to the Discord community for discussing modular and other music technology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.